What's going on, everybody? Christian Ballard here at Mississippi State Live at the Voice of College Football. We are on episode 9 tonight. We've talked a lot the past couple weeks, and we've broken down the offense. We've looked at the schedule. What haven't we talked about yet? Well, we got to do defense as a whole, even though we've kind of hit the nail on the head and kind of talked about it a little bit here or there. But Andrew, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Good to have you back on the show. Glad the move down to Florida went well for you.
Oh
And
yeah.
yeah, ready to talk about this Bulldog defense, which obviously is the side of the ball that Bulldog fans are most interested in, I think, given the way last season played out. Um, just wanted to say right off the top, hey, make sure if you're tuning in, give us a like. Be sure to share this, subscribe to the channel, and put that notification bell on so that whenever we do go live, you know that we're up and ready to go. We'd love to have you guys in here interacting throughout the show. It's great. Want to continue growing this channel. Glad to see that the last few times we've done this, the had some live viewers, and it's been really
Mhm.
cool to be able to have the interaction throughout the show. So yeah, like, comment, subscribe, thumbs up, all that type of stuff. But yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about this Bulldog defense and a unit that last season was pretty awful. I mean, there's
Yeah.
no getting, not pretty, very, very awful. Um, One of the worst defenses in college football a year ago. You gave up over 34 points a game, about 456 yards a game at 6.34 yards per play. This is the worst Bulldog defense that we have seen since 2003, over 20 years. The MSU was this bad defensively. And look, the expectations were low going into the season. We knew with the pieces that they had lost that it was going to be tough to field a pretty good defense in year one for Jeff Lebby. I think the hope was that offensively you would be good enough to overcome that, and they weren't. And for our thoughts on the offense, please go back and check out that show. We went deep into that side of the ball and why we're pretty optimistic about the Bulldog offense for this year. But defensively, it was just a train wreck last year. You just had so little experience back on that side of the ball. You weren't able to make waves in the portal the way that I think a lot of people were hoping you could, just because a lot of transfer portal players last year weren't all that interested in coming and being Bulldogs. And you kind of understand it, right? It was a first time defensive coordinator in Coleman Hutzler. It's a first time head coach in Jeff Lebby. That's an offensive minded guy. So, what is his approach going to be to leading a defense? It's a program that obviously was going through a lot of overturn. So it's kind of like, I mean, is that a place you want to step into year one? You didn't have a lot of proven names on the defensive coaching staff. Turner, defensive line coach, a bigger name, someone who's been around a lot. But
Mhm.
that alone was not enough to really draw a lot of attention in the portal. And obviously, it also hurts that State, with Jeff Lebby, year one coaching staff, you're just going to have a hard time bringing in a lot of impact players out of the portal right away. So they had to rely on a lot of guys that were already on the roster. And it's a lot of guys on the roster that just weren't really SEC caliber players, to put it bluntly. And you saw it play out that way throughout the season. It was a unit that did not perform well really at all. You saw it the first game of the season against Eastern Kentucky. You know, there were moments where Eastern Kentucky was able to move the ball and find success. Um, and then obviously Arizona State week 2 and Cam Scatabo running roughshod over the Bulldog defense all throughout that game. And then Toledo bludgeoning them. Florida, who offensively for the first half of that season really didn't get into gear, had no trouble moving the ball on State. Now, look, as the season progressed, did they have some moments? Sure. They played pretty well in the first half against Texas, with Arch Manning there getting his first start. Against Tennessee, I thought they did a decent job of sort of keeping them in it. They had a few big plays against Texas A&M. The final game of the year against Ole Miss, they played their best defensive game of the season. State defensively played good enough in the Egg Bowl to get a win. That game plan on that day was good against what Ole Miss wanted to do. Offensively, you didn't do enough. So the defense did make some strides as the year went along, but this is still a rough unit, or it was a rough unit a year ago. And you have now had to go into this offseason trying to completely overhaul things. Now, the kind of big part of this that was frustrating to some, confusing to many, was that you didn't make any changes to the defensive coaching staff. Coleman Hutzler stays your defensive coordinator. with the argument being that despite the flaws State had defensively, despite there being various videos put out making fun of some of the alignments that Mississippi State was trotting out there and some of the things that they were doing from a schematic standpoint on defense, that the talent was so bad, you can't really blame Coleman Hutzler for what the defense was, and that you have to give him an opportunity to get players in here that are SEC caliber, power conference caliber, to be honest, when you had a lot of G5 level players last year, and give them a chance to field a defense that could be competent. Now, I buy that for Hutzler. I will say a couple of the coaching staff, or positional coaches rather, I don't really know why some changes weren't made at a few spots, especially with the way some of the recruiting went at those various spots. But you didn't get rid of anybody. You did bring pieces in. Vincent Dancy comes over from Colorado to be your defensive ends and outside linebackers coach and help you improve pass rush, which is going to be a huge thing for this team when they had 10 sacks as a team a year ago. 10 sacks total for the entire season. Your leader in sacks, I believe Zachary Tillman, had 3.5 as a linebacker. No defensive lineman finished the year with more than 1 sack. The defensive lineman who led the team in sacks was Calvin Dinkins, who played the season opener, got a sack against Eastern Kentucky, got hurt, and then did not play again the rest of the season. And that was your defensive lineman who led the team in sacks.
Yeah. You also had a guy by the name of Ty Cooper who transferred out, I think, over to Tulsa. He was pretty much tied with 1 sack, but other than that, like, there wasn't
He's
much
a linebacker,
of.
but yeah.
Well, yeah. But as a unit, the defensive line, the linebacking core, they just had such a hard time playing as a team, coming together at the right moments. And obviously, when you break it down, like, they just had pressure, had trouble getting pressure. They had trouble just playing aggressive, wanting to win football, at least from what we saw. And that's something that I think has to really change this year.
Yeah, no, it has to change completely. And again, that's where some of the coaching staff changes, you hope that helped. You hope bringing over Vincent Dancy, who's got familiarity within the state of Mississippi. He was the head coach at Mississippi Valley for a few seasons and had been an assistant coach in the state for many years, a Mississippi native. That's a guy who last year improved Colorado's pass rush. Colorado defensively was significantly improved from year 1 to year 2 under Deion Sanders because defensively they were able to generate pressure. They brought in some good pieces in the portal along that defensive line, and they were able to generate pressure up front. You're hoping that Vincent Dancy coming in can help improve that defensive ends and outside linebacker group to where now State can generate some more pass rush. Because, again, last year, quarterbacks were not under duress at all. What would also help getting better with the pass rush is being able to stop the run, because last year teams could just run at will, and then that gives yourself some easy play action opportunities where, as a defense, you're not able to just pin your ears back and get after the quarterbacks. They were, could not stop the run whatsoever last year. Everyone was able to run over them. You're hoping that they have gotten bigger and stronger up front to be able to withstand that. And that's where, when we get talking into these positional previews here in just a few minutes, that was a big point of emphasis, was getting bigger up front. And the other emphasis was depth. They had so many issues from a depth standpoint along the defensive line a year ago with all of the guys that they had who got hurt, that this year that they just simply weren't prepared to deal with that. They feel better about that going into this season. Also on the coaching staff, you had a pair of analysts in Paul Rhodes and Mike McIntyre, guys who are former FBS head coaches, guys who had some success as head coaches, but also had a lot of success as defensive coordinators, guys who have been DCs within the SEC previously. You are hoping that they can step in and, one, from a division of labor standpoint, help you to better coach some of the various position groups. I know Paul Rhodes specifically has been working with the DBs. That's a group that the whole defense has to take a step forward, but DBs especially have to take a step forward. You're hoping his experience there helps improve that unit. You're hoping Mike McIntyre can do the same. You're also hoping they can help Coleman Hutzler. And that from a game planning standpoint, those are guys who can step in and say, hey, here are things that we think you could be doing a little bit better. Here are ways that we would want to attack the opposing offense, or this is how we want to play against this team, or this is what we want to do in this situation. Having guys that are veterans like that are going to be, couldn't could not be any more beneficial for State. That's big. So you didn't get rid of anybody, but you did bring pieces in. And then I kind of already talked about from a transfer portal standpoint, you were able to be much more successful in the portal this offseason than you were going into year one. They were able to bring in a lot of new faces at nearly every position group. And I say nearly because there's one position group that they didn't really hit the portal all that well, as we'll talk about later. But defensive line, it is night and day with the pieces that you brought in and the bodies you brought in. Linebacker, you brought in a lot of new pieces there, including some guys who are, hybrid pass rushers, specifically to help you generate more pass rush when that was such a big problem a year ago. The safety room, you brought in some really intriguing pieces. Corner is a big question, even going into this year from a talent standpoint, because you didn't get the pieces you wanted. But there is no doubt you have more bodies. You have significantly more depth. You look to be more talented. On paper, you have brought in guys who have been productive or, based on a recruiting profile, look to be much more talented than what you had previously. You also have, I mean, I have to show it just because it's hyping me up. Shout out to Andrew, knows ball more than anybody else who covers State. I don't know about that, but I do appreciate. Shout out to T. Watley. I know I do like that. I should have finished my thought instead of going to the little comment that hypes me up. But yeah, with the new pieces coming in, you definitely feel like, again, you have more depth, you have more talent, you have more size along the defensive line. Again, it is night and day when you look at the bodies up front, what you were running out there a year ago to what you're going to be running out this season. This defense should be better. And from an execution standpoint, SEC Media Days, Isaac Smith harped on it, that execution was lacking in year one, and it absolutely was. Now, as I talked about, I think some of that lack of execution goes back to a lack of talent. I do think that plays a role that, okay, yeah, you may not have been executing well, but how much of that lack of execution is that you really aren't good enough to be put in those spots? But I do think another season under their belt, those guys are going to be better. They're going to take a step forward. And there is a point to be had that continuity on defense and just knowing your system and your assignments well enough that you can simply get in the right spot, because guys couldn't do that last year. That in and of itself will help you. Now, if you're smaller and slower and not as strong as the guys across from you, you can be in the right spot and you're still going to get run over or run by. But I do think State has gotten bigger, stronger, faster, and will help themselves out. So, yeah, there have been a lot of changes, and I think there's good reason to believe this unit will take a nice step forward.
Yeah, I mean, I said this when I first started out on this show. I had talked a little bit about the defense, and I said the only way to go is up. Like it can't get any more. Um, it can't get much worse. I mean, it probably could, but it shouldn't in a way than what it has been. And you mentioned something about them lacking talent. I agree. They're not the big dogs of the SEC. They're not Texas. They're not even Tennessee. They're not Georgia. They're not Alabama. They can't just pick out these five, let alone they have a hard time with four-star recruits on that side of the ball coming in. But they could definitely get some three stars. And we've seen a lot of three stars turn into studs and go on to have great NFL careers. The thing is not, I would hate to sit here and look at what they have and look at a kid on that team and say, man, you're terrible. You don't have any talent. I would hate to do that. So I'm not going to do that. I don't want to sit here and say they lack talent, but they definitely lack playing as a unit, playing with execution. And quite honestly, it seems like they've lacked coaching for quite some time. If any of that comes together this year, they take a step forward defensively. I think, well, I don't know what they'll do, but I would hope that they would. And it seems as if Mississippi State is in a position where, yeah, they got to try to protect Shapen. They got to take steps forward offensively with these new guys and Anthony Evans or whoever coming over from Georgia. All these transfers they got to focus on the other side of the ball too. because week in and week out, they're going to face these quarterbacks, these receivers, these running backs. And yeah, they're probably not going to sit there and be like, we're going to try to get 10 wins all in 1 year. But if the goal, and I've harped on this, I said, look, they got to hit 6 wins, and the goal should be making a bowl game with Jeff Lebby. That should be the goal. If they want to do that, they got to get the defense together on the field every single week and make plays when it matters the most. Get off the field on third down. Don't give up a big explosive play every other play.
It absolutely has to be a unit that can play just simply more competently, which that is where having that experience is going to help them out. That this year they do bring a lot more, several more guys back. Now, there is the point that do you want to bring a lot of those guys back when they had the issues they did a year ago? I don't know, but
Right.
that is where they go in the portal and they add a lot of talent and they have guys that are going to be able to step in and be big contributors. So, look, across the board, you have more experience, you have more depth, you look to have more size, you look to have more talent. Ideally, better coaching in the additions that you made to the coaching staff. To your point, it's hard to see them being worse. I do think this defense is
Right.
going to take a step forward. Now, how big of a step is that? That's sort of to be seen. But I do think this defense will be better. Starting off as one of the big reasons to think this defense will be better is the defensive line. And night and day, you're talking about a 9-day difference from where this group was a season ago. Last year, you basically reached a point where you were playing 6 guys up front along the defensive line that were even available to play because of the injuries that they had to that unit. They brought in several transfers. I should have had the number in front of me, but I'm not going to count here on the show with how many transfers they ended up bringing in. But they brought in several guys at every single position that they felt can step in and make them better. If nothing else, they needed more depth. They needed more size. The size thing is huge. It's kind of a fun phrasing. The size thing is huge because they got bowled over last year. When Toledo is able to line up and just run at you all day, you have problems. And we saw that with so many teams that they were facing. They just didn't have the guys in the trenches who could hold up. They have gone about addressing that this year. And you look at some of the guys who are expected to be contributors on this unit. Deontay Anderson is up to 280 pounds at defensive end. Rashawn Thomas, a transfer out of NIU, 300 pounds. Red Hibbler, 275, but he's more of a pass rusher. Calvin Dinkins, if he's healthy, is 320. Will Whitson, 295. Jamil Burrows, 330 pounds. Jere Bledsoe, 315. Terrence Hibbler, 310. You just have more size up front than you did a year ago. Having guys, Diesel Moy at 320 pounds. Simply having guys who are 315 plus should help you. Now, I know size isn't everything, but if those are space eaters up front, that's going to help them out. Because, again, you didn't have space eaters up front. And if those guys are just able to open up lanes for those pass rushers to step in and be able to generate – or not pass rushers, the linebackers to be able to step in and go in and make plays, that's going to be massive for what they're going to be able to do. But I do think this is a group that could be more talented. Will Whitson comes over from Coastal Carolina, where he was incredibly productive in the 17 games that he played over 2 seasons with the Chanticleers. And he was on pace for a big season a year ago before he gets injured. He decides to take his red shirt and sit out the rest of the year and transfer. That's a guy that going into last season was getting some hype as a Senior Bowl watch list player. So a guy that the expectation was 2024 is going to be his last season. He's going to have a big year for Coastal, and that's someone that NFL scouts were showing interest in. That's something Mississippi State didn't have on their defensive line a year ago. So that's a guy who steps in as it looks like going to be playing him kind of as a hybrid defensive tackle, defensive end, probably like a 5 technique type spot, or maybe as a 4-eye. So a little bit more along the interior, but still more a little bit of not fully an edge player, but also not like playing in the nose or anything like that. That's clearly a talented guy. That's a guy who has production. Rashawn Thomas is a guy who at NIU put up big numbers over the past 2 years. Now, you're playing in the MAC, but the guy had a lot of production, a bunch of tackles at defensive end. And again, we're talking about a guy who's up to 300 pounds now playing defensive end, which I think that kind of tells you State wanted to get bigger and stronger up front to be able to better stop the run. Red Hibbler comes over from NC State. That's a guy that 2 seasons ago led NC State in sacks. So we talk about being able to generate more of a pass rush. That's a guy who steps in as a defensive end and can help you get better along that spot. I don't think anyone is more interesting than Jamil Burroughs, who has not played college football the last 2 seasons. Started his career at Alabama, was a talented player who had some hype coming out of high school, was a contributor on that 2020 national championship team, took a red shirt the next year in 2021. 2022 was a guy who was a regular contributor, and going into the 23 season, the expectation was that was going to be one of Alabama's top defensive linemen. Well, he has an incident in the summer that leads to him leaving the team, goes to Miami. He had to sit out the year because of the transfer rules, but so he didn't get to play the 2023 season, and then kind of seemed like he left the team in 2024. Based on age and based on the fact that he hasn't played in the last 2 years and the last 2 teams he was with, he had to leave. Those are major red flags. Those are very real concerns, which is why when he was added to this team, he wasn't officially added to the team. He joined in the spring on a trial basis. He had to come in and prove himself both as a player who's capable after not playing the last 2 years, but also as a guy, like, have you matured enough that we can trust to have you on a roster? By all accounts, he has taken that opportunity and run with it, and that he recognizes this is my last shot. I need to make the most of it. And he is someone that everyone has talked about had a very good spring, seems to already have been having a good preseason camp. That's a guy at 6'3", 330 pounds, is massive. And again, just a couple years ago, Alabama was talking about he was going to be a major contributor along their defensive line. Now, that's 2 years ago. Does that still apply now? I don't know. But the talent is clearly there for that guy to be a force at nose tackle. You need someone like that. So if he can step in and he can sort of capture whatever it was he had a couple seasons ago, and he has really made the most of this opportunity, that's someone that's going to be huge for this team up front, both literally and figuratively. And you look at some of the other guys stepping in on the defensive line. Jere Bledsoe, I think there's some excitement there as a transfer out of Texas, just simply adding some depth. Those are all guys that I would expect to contribute. Those are 5 transfers, and I think they're all going to play a role. Then you look at some of the guys returning. Deontay Anderson, the defensive end. This is a 5th-year senior. This is last chance for him. By all accounts, he's had a very good offseason, and he has taken a nice step forward. It's kind of similar when we talk about Trevion Williams, who looks to be playing a little bit more defensive end going into this year as opposed to defensive tackle where he's been so far in his career. The profile was there as a recruit coming out of high school, but this is a guy who is going to be the next big-time defensive lineman at Mississippi State and hasn't lived up to that. Now, how much of that is a product of being on his 3rd defensive coordinator or being in his 2nd different defensive system, dealing with an injury as a redshirt freshman, and then being sort of thrust into a role last year as a part of a struggling unit? I don't know. Maybe his development is simply stunted, and this is a guy that is going to break out and be a big-time player for them this year. But like, they need him to take the step forward. Like, this is it for him. Kind of like with Deontay Anderson, we're saying, all right, this is it. This is it for Trevion Williams. But the talent is there. Calvin Dinkins is the other guy everyone is really excited about. As I mentioned, he led Mississippi State defensive linemen with sacks last season, playing in 1 game. Now, he had 1 sack. It's not like he had multiple sacks in that 1 game. It's more a testament to how pathetic the defensive line was a year ago than it is his ability as a player. But that is a guy that everyone has thought, man, if he could stay healthy, he could do something. The last 2 seasons, though, he has played 2 career games, and he got hurt in both of them. But if he is healthy this time, if he could be a contributor, the belief is that is a guy who could be a big-time player for Mississippi State up front. There's a bunch of excitement there. And then you talk about a guy like Kedrick Bingley-Jones as someone who, last year dealt with injury, and you get him back as sort of a depth piece this year. And you have some younger guys on the roster that have played. Now, Kai McClendon is someone who had to play for you last year as a true freshman that ended up getting hurt in the spring, tore his ACL. We don't know if he's going to be available for State this year. That would be a difficult blow if that is the case, because he was someone that had some flashes for State a year ago, but you weren't expecting him to be a starter. You probably weren't even expecting him to be one of your second-string guys. He was going to be a depth piece for you. And again, he may be able to come back. We don't know yet. But that's kind of a point to all the additions they made in the offseason, is that they have the depth to be able to withstand one of those guys going down, if not a couple. Now, you don't want that to happen. You obviously hope it doesn't. but I look at this room and it is night and day from where they were a year ago. I think they are going to be better against the run. I think, if nothing else, this is not a unit that should get run over by a MAC team. So Northern Illinois comes to town in week 4. And I talked about NIU. The last episode I did was breaking down the non-conference opponents. And NIU is probably not a great example because of what they're losing along their offensive line. But that's a team that, like I said, they're going to want to run the football and run the football a lot. I don't think they're going to be able to get push on State's defensive line. Famous last words on my part, but I think State's defensive line has improved enough they should be able to handle that. I think the same goes for week 1 in Hattiesburg. I think State's defensive line should be improved enough that these G5 teams are not able to just go and have plenty of success running the football against them. I think it'll be improved enough that you're able to find some pass rush from that unit. And just to give you a chance, if your defensive line is bad, you're not going to be able to field a good defense. It is impossible to. You've got to have the guys up front. Does State have the guys up front to field a good defense or even an average defense? I don't know. Do they have the guys up front that they should not be terrible on the defensive side of the ball? I think they've improved that spot enough to be able to take that step forward.
Absolutely. I would say they have the talent there to be average, possibly at best. Then you look at another defensive position group, what about the linebacking core, Andrew? Because I look at this and I say there's a lot of new faces there. There's a lot of guys that come back. There's depth, but there's some guys with experience that could bring good leadership. Darian, how do you say this? Gillette comes from Teague High School, and he transfers in from Texas. They bring in a junior college guy in Montrell Chapman, who's 6'3", 230, very well built, from Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College in Batesville. They brought in another guy too from Tennessee. Was it Malik Celia? I might have that wrong, but
Jalen Smith from Tennessee. Malik Silla is from Texas A&M.
That's it. That's right. That's right. But point being, they really attacked the portal on that side of the ball on defense as a whole, but they really attacked it in the linebacking core. I expect that to take a step forward, but I don't trust it to take a step forward. I'm not going to say it will or won't. I don't know. The expectation should be you have the guys that can play. Like, if you're playing middle linebacker, you should have no problem disrupting the passing game. If you're playing up front, inside, outside linebacker, you have no trouble playing off the edge, getting to quarterbacks left and right. I need to see it to believe it first before I say that it's ready to do that. But I think there's a lot of depth and potential there at linebacker. What's your thoughts?
I like the linebacker room quite a bit.
Yeah.
They did have one significant loss in the offseason. Stone Blanton, who ended up finishing second on the team in tackles. He kind of surprisingly entered the draft. He was not invited to the combine, and he went undrafted. He was with the 49ers, which I'll be honest, I don't know what the status of that is. I haven't kept up with how he performed throughout camp and if he's even still on the roster. I hope he is for his own sake.
I checked that, actually. He should still be, but I want to say he's practice squad. I could be wrong. Don't hold me to it.
But, yeah, that was sort of a surprising loss. And, look, he played well for State down the stretch last season after kind of first half of the year probably being out of position quite frequently. But not a guy where it's such a big-time talent that you're talking about him being a significant loss. I think, first, I'll start with some of the guys you have coming back. Zachary Tillman is someone that State fans are going to be really excited to watch this season. Sort of broke out last year in a backup role, led the team with 3.5 sacks, 30 tackles, had an interception, forced a fumble, blocked a kick, had a couple passes broken up. He felt like one of those guys that every time he was on the field, he was making a big play. He was making a game-changing play. He wasn't out there regularly to rack up tackles because he was backing up. I think he was backing up Nick Mitchell officially, who is still on the roster as well. And, it's one of those things where you'd like to get them both on the field at the same time a little bit more, where he should have been on the field more last year. But the guy's very athletic. He's already shown his ability as a pass rusher. He's clearly a big play type guy. That's someone who I think is going to have a really big year. I mentioned Nick Mitchell, a solid linebacker. I don't think a superstar, but a guy who got experience for you a year ago, won a starting job for you a year ago, and you bring him back as a returning starter. Is he going to be a starter comes the season? I think right now, probably trending that he will with the starter week 1. I don't know if he'll be the guy who ends up playing the majority of snaps there, but that's a veteran you have in the room who made some plays for you a year ago. And look, elsewhere at linebacker, the jack position, Brandon Jennings. That's a guy who, in more of a pass rush type role, showed flashes for you a year ago. Didn't have the type of season I think a lot of people were hoping for, but some of that also goes down to the issues the defense has as a whole, that the defensive linemen alongside him were not performing well, which put more pressure on him. I already kind of talked about it's tough to really be able to pass rush all that effectively if the offense is just able to hand the football off for 5-6 yards a pop every single time. Tough to deal with that. But I think he's in store for a big season. He's a very talented player. And again, someone who could sort of be a little bit of a terror off the edge for MSU. So you look at those 3 guys coming back, you already have a pretty good starting nucleus to work with at linebacker. You talked about the transfers coming in, some really intriguing transfers at that position. Jalen Smith is someone that Tennessee wanted to come back. He was a good contributor. He wasn't going to be one of their starters, and I think he wasn't a starter a year ago, and they're bringing back their starting linebackers this year, which is why he ultimately transferred. But he was someone Tennessee wanted within that linebacker rotation. He played a lot for them a season ago. Was going to
He
play
was like one of those. He was like one of those guys that you wanted to save. You didn't want to like put him over who you already had, but you definitely wanted him out there in some way because you knew he could come through and make a big play. I actually read up on him a little bit earlier, and just watching him play, the dude I think is really, really good. The numbers don't show it on paper because he didn't get a lot of playing time, and you had a lot of guys in the depth chart for Tennessee over the past few years. But anyway, the guy has potential there. I think he's very fast. He was a 3-star coming out of high school. Just overall, I mean, the guy also ran track. He's fast. And Mississippi State needs that speed, but they also need that aggression from guys like that. You would hope that he's a guy that starts this year, right?
I think he'll battle for a starting job for sure. And to your
Yeah.
point about, Tennessee, we're not going to start you, but we want to keep you on the roster. That's one of the examples of the way things have changed in this portal era, where the more talented teams cannot hoard talent the way they could previously. That
Right.
guys who are good enough to start elsewhere are going to go elsewhere and are not just going to stay on the roster just because, well, I can be a contributor here, but I'm not good. I'm not going to be the guy who starts for you. So Jalen Smith is one of those that comes to Mississippi State, going to battle for a starting job. Darian Gillette comes over from Texas, another guy that there's a big-time recruit coming out of high school, was in Texas a couple years and didn't really make much of an impact, but now gets sort of a fresh start at Mississippi State, and someone that I think, by all accounts, had a pretty good offseason and can be a nice contributor. Reese, I'm sorry, unfortunately, we can't start over. That's my guy, Reese. I think he's probably going to say that every time he joins the show, but But Darian Gillette, someone who I think can contribute for you. When we talk about that inside linebacker group with Zachary Tillman, Nick Mitchell, Jalen Smith, Darian Gillette, those are 4 guys who I think are all solid to even really good players for you to sort of start with. And then, like I mentioned, with Brandon Jennings off the edge, I think you've got a good player at the jack position. Also stepping in at jack linebacker, Malik Silla comes over from Texas A&M. Big frame, good pass rusher, someone that A&M was really excited for the potential there, and someone who should help State from a pass rush standpoint. Neve Sanders from Northern Illinois, sort of the same thing, a guy who has a lot of production at the lower level you think can step in. And then you got some younger guys in this room that people are excited about as well. I mean, Tyler Lockhart was the prize recruit in this previous signing class. And that's someone as a true freshman you think might be able to make an impact. Fat Forrest is someone that I think fans are really excited about. LaKendrick James and Montrell Chapman, like you talked about his JUCO transfers, have a chance to contribute. Tyshawn Willis, who again was one of State's better signees this previous signing class, as another guy who can sort of be a pass rusher for you off the edge. This is an exciting linebacker room, and I think they've got a lot of guys that they're going to want to get involved. Now, there is a name we have not talked about as a linebacker that is now technically part of this room. And, he also kind of plays another position as well. But even if we weren't talking about him as a part of it, I would be really excited about this state linebacker room.
Yeah. And that would be which guy? I'm
That would be Isaac Smith.
Isaac Smith. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just making sure.
Yeah. Isaac Smith last season obviously leads the Bulldogs in tackles, led the SEC in tackles with 127 in 11 games played. More than 11 and a half tackles per game, which is absolutely absurd. There was a lot of fuss made over the fact that you've got that guy as a safety leading you in tackles. That was very much overblown just from the fact that, one, the safety position he was playing was one that was really designed to come down and be a tackler. It's part of the safety role that he played. Also, he effectively played as a linebacker half the year. It was already down in position to make tackles anyway. Now, it is also true there were some tackles he made because other guys simply weren't making stops. So, yes, the numbers were inflated a little bit by product of the lack of production and talent around him. But the guy also played a role designed to rack up tackles, and that's what he did. This season, it sounds like they are working more primarily towards playing him at Sam linebacker. Now, you don't see a lot of teams trot out a Sam or strong side linebacker much these days. That position has kind of been replaced by nickel corner. So the star position, which State does have in its defense, the star position for most teams is a nickel or the nickel back, the nickel corner, whatever. Basically the same thing. That position has largely taken over Sam linebacker in the majority of defenses, but it sounds like they're going to be playing Isaac primarily as a Sam linebacker. Now, does that mean that they are putting him on the field as opposed to a nickel back? I don't think so. I think he would just play nickel for State if they needed him to. I'm trying to go back and watch last season a little bit more to see him put in those roles and how that's going to impact things. But the main change here is you're going to see less 3-high looks and more looks that just sort of 3-high safety looks, that is, and more looks that put Isaac Smith up closer to the line of scrimmage. Now, I would wonder a little bit about that in terms of him having to be a coverage player, because if you are a nickel corner in the year 2025, you better be able to play coverage. And again, I know we're talking about him playing Sam linebacker. The Sam is the nickel. So if you have him playing at Sam as your nickel, you have to have either you have to trust that guy can hold up in coverage, or you have to trust you have someone over top who can sort of help him out. Which, again, I'm weird on that, because for as good as Isaac Smith is, he is not a great coverage in space type guy. So I do wonder a little bit about putting him in that role. I do know this, though. He is very good in the box safety, Sam linebacker type role. Apparently, he has done a good job as a pass rusher off the edge in preseason camp, playing more of this Sam linebacker type role. He's bulked up. I mean, I think he's probably in for a really big year, but I still think you're going to see him playing a little bit of a hybridized role within this defense, including with an MSU safety room that has a lot of talent alongside Isaac Smith. MSU safeties look to be pretty good going into this season, which might be part of why they wanted to play Smith more as a linebacker to get more of those guys on the field.
Yeah, I think, like I say, the depth is there for Mississippi State, and I think that what they want to do is on one hand, they want that go-to guy at linebacker, really at all positions, but they want to be able to trust that if something goes wrong and it doesn't work out, it's a next man up type of program. I don't want to say it's there quite yet, but I feel like it's working its way up there a little with what they're bringing in each year, especially what they brought in through the portal the last couple years, guys from Tennessee and schools like that. Uh, I think, overall, when I look at this defense and what I really want to see this year, I just want to see guys play with aggression. I want to see them play fast, be physical, not afraid to hit. I know that targeting and everything like that in college football today kind of gets in the way of being able to be a big time playmaker on defense like that. But you you definitely got to pick up speed. You got to play downfield really, really well. The secondary's got to play that better man coverage. I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of areas to improve on if you're Mississippi State. And as I've said a couple times on this show, the only way to go after a disastrous season for really any program, but especially if you're in the SEC, the only way you can go is up.
You certainly hope so. Yeah, no, like with the piece they brought in, you feel they can take a step forward for sure. And yeah, you playing with aggression, you want to see more of that. And I think that's kind of been the talk of spring. And I know in the scrimmage that they did over the weekend, defensively, they played well and they showed a lot of aggression and stuff they can build off of with some big plays. You need more of that this year for sure. And look, this is a position group at safety that's going to be able to help you do that. I mean, if Isaac Smith is still playing more as a safety, I think he could still be really good in that role. But I think if you play him at safety, you want him as a middle safety, which is, again, what he was doing last year if you're going to play out of that 3-3-5 type look. I don't know if the middle safety role for Isaac Smith I really like because it allows him to, one, you're not putting him one-on-one in coverage all that much. And if he is getting coverage, he's typically covering a tight end as opposed to a slot receiver. Two, it allows him to be a guy that's able to run down into the box and make tackles. Playing him more at the start, the strong side linebacker spot, I'm a little bit, again, I'm curious how they're going to go about handling that a little bit more. But they do have safeties around him, and if we're talking about playing him at Sam, these guys are going to have to be able to provide good coverage behind him. They got some safeties I think are going to be really good players. You do have to look at the new faces stepping in, Tony Mitchell and Jerron Manning specifically. Tony Mitchell comes out of East Mississippi Community College, another really good signee for State in this offseason as a JUCO transfer. Started his career at Alabama, 5-star recruit coming out of high school. Gets kicked off the team. So State's got a couple of these guys who were dismissed from Alabama on the roster that you're expecting to be contributors. But, man, another physical, hard-hitting type guy. 6'1", 215, so a little bit on the bigger side, kind of similar to Isaac Smith and build, similar in that they're both guys who want to go and lay the lumber and make an impact, but also probably a guy that's got a little bit more athleticism to him as well. I think from a pure talent standpoint, he's probably right up there as one of the most talented players on the entire defense, and that's a guy that you're going to want to get involved. Jerron Manning steps over from Old Dominion, where last year he was incredibly productive with over 80 tackles. I believe it was 3 interceptions, a few pass breakups, some tackles for loss. A guy who was just sort of all over the field for the Monarchs and had a really good coverage grade, according to PFF, last season within the Sun Belt Conference. That's another guy stepping in that sounds like made an impact in the offseason and you think is a good player. So if, again, you're playing Jerron Manning and Tony Mitchell as your top two guys at safety with Isaac Smith playing sort of a hybrid type role, that's a really good group. But you also have some experienced guys who are not just terrible players. Brylan Lanier returns, and I think Lanier should be a little bit more comfortable this year. I think he'll just be playing as sort of that deep middle safety. He's a guy State fans kind of are going to be iffy about, especially because of the play he had against Georgia where he looks to just give up on a touchdown, just let a guy go and score. It was a tough look for him for sure, but it feels like he's bounced back from it. And he's a guy who made some flash plays for State a year ago. And I think playing as a safety, not having to play corner where he had to play like half of last season because of injuries, I think will help him out. Hunter Washington is a veteran on the roster. I get Hunter's not a guy that has ever been a true superstar for State, but that's a veteran. And having veterans at the safety position is a good thing. And it's one of the things at safety, like just having guys who understand where they're supposed to be is sort of one of the biggest things you can just ask for from a defense. You don't necessarily need guys who are superstars. You have guys who know where they need to be. And I think Tyler Woodard in his second season coming out of JUCO can kind of provide you a little bit of the same. It's a safety room where I think, again, you've got some reason to be excited. I didn't even talk about Stonka Burnside, who makes the move from wide receiver to safety after last season in the opportunities he got in special teams, just continually laid the lumber. And we know this is a guy who's got big-time athleticism. We know this is a guy that coming out of high school, many people felt like, yeah, he could play receiver, but if he plays safety, he's going to be a stud. and State obviously gives him the opportunity to play receiver. They're probably still going to give him some chances to catch some passes this year, but now he's at a safety position where he probably suits him a little bit better. You've got a lot of talent and depth in that room as well. I think linebacker and safety, I feel really good about the options Mississippi State has. So you start talking about protecting the middle of the field, both in the intermediate to deep parts of the field. I think State's got some great options. I really like the rooms. I think they'll be able to rotate bodies. I think they've got guys who can play and be impact players, and you should build the defense around those groups. Now, the elephant in the room defensively is cornerback, because that is a spot where, I think D-line, linebacker, safety, I can sit here and confidently say Mississippi State is improved from where they were a year ago. I cannot say that about corner. Because corner, you lost your number one player in Bryce Pollock to Texas Tech. And I know he was not a shutdown corner on the outside, but he was a solid starter. He was graded as a top 10 corner within the SEC a season ago by PFF. That is a significant loss. Like, he was one of the few guys on the State defense last season where you didn't want to lose him to the portal. And he ends up transferring out. And they didn't do a great job of addressing that need with the additions they made in the offseason. You get Javen James from Kennesaw State, who was kind of a solid player at Kennesaw, but not a guy that on paper you look at and say is ready to be an SEC starting corner. The intriguing addition through the portal is Dwight Lewis III, who comes from Marion College at the NAIA ranks. 6'1", 190. Got
a
good.
Little under.
No, that's good.
Would you consider that's good size for that position, you'd say?
Yeah, no, that's good size for corner.
All right.
Yeah, for sure. That's good size at corner. 6'1", 195, actually.
Oh, 6'1". Okay. I don't know what I heard in the height, but 6'1's pretty good.
Yeah, 6'1", 195. He's got good size at corner, good ball skills. Was someone who was able to make plays last season, over the last couple of years at Marion. Again, NAIA. Good tackler. They feel he's got good athleticism. I mean, the traits are there to be a power conference player, and other power conference programs wanted him. Wisconsin and Arizona were among his final three in this transfer up. The evaluation is that this guy can play. But we are talking about a massive change going from, again, NAIA football to SEC football. Can he pull that off and be someone that can contribute for you right away? I don't know, but they kind of need him to. Because you just don't have a lot of clear answers in this room, which is where you start to look at the guys who are coming back. Kelly Jones is going to be one of your starters on the outside. At this point, Kelly's going to start. 6'4", 195. At 6'4", that is massive for a corner. You do not see 6'4" corners. The guy runs blazing fast. We think the potential is sky high. We know the potential is sky high based on the speed and based on the size that he has. If he can develop into a big-time corner, you are talking about a first-round draft pick within the next couple of years, because guys who are that big and can run that fast, if you can play corner at a high level, you are a hot commodity. He has not shown to this point in his career that he can play cornerback. Now, I will give him credit. In the Egg Bowl, going up against some good Ole Miss receivers, he played well. He played his best game of the year in the last week of the season against a good receiving corps. He stepped up and played well in that game. Whatever he did in that game, he has got to build upon going into the season, because he is State's top corner going into the year. Like, they did not bring someone in to become Bryce Pollock on this team, who you were hoping, again, Pollock could have taken a step forward and been a really good player for you going into this season. They need Kelly Jones to step in and at least give you what Bryce Pollock was able to give you. Now, who's going to start opposite of him? Diego Brumfield, possibly. Didn't get to play for you much last season, but a guy who at Memphis a couple years ago was a starter, had a lot of production, but also a guy that you kind of question, is he really an SEC caliber player? I don't know. Do you turn it over to a young guy like an Elijah Cannon? Probably not. You do have an intriguing young player in Kyle Johnson, who's a 4-star freshman signee. Is that a guy who, based on recruiting profile, can step in a little bit and be someone who can play for you? Now, the name of intrigue that has kind of come up here over these last few weeks is another transfer, but a JUCO transfer, Amarian Jet Jefferson, This is another guy coming out of the JUCO ranks that I've heard from a lot of people. They like what they see when they watch the kid, and they think he's played well this offseason. There's a chance he's able to step in and contribute a little bit. From T. Watley, I have some faith in Kelly Jones. Do you think the safeties can help some of the corner deficiencies? Possibly. But part of the issue there is corners are still kind of inevitably going to end up on an island. That's part of just you're just going to get that happening for you a little bit more. There are ways you can go about helping that group out. I don't think State fans would want to see it. And it's frankly building more off the type of defense that they played early last season, where you were getting 3 high safeties, 3 down linemen, like 5 guys in the box, and you're just playing a lot of drop 8. I don't think a lot of fans want to see that, but I do think that's a way that you can help your corners out a little bit by putting less pressure on them. Now, the other way you help your corners out is getting more pass rush. That is the thing for this unit last year. It's hard to blame them for some of the bust in coverage when they had to cover, for very long periods of time because there was no pass rush. Quarterback had all day to throw. You have to be able to get after the quarterback much better than they were able to last year. So if you were better up front and you get more pass rush, that's going to help this unit out. But yeah, Marion Jefferson, that's someone that there's some intrigue about. Maybe he can step in. I keep saying maybe.
I'm actually curious. Yeah, I'm curious about him because I've heard some good things about Jet. They call him Jet Jefferson.
Yes.
It was interesting. At Park Lane Academy, I found this out. Was he actually played quarterback, not to be confused with his current position at corner, but he passed for over 1,000 yards. He rushed. He's fast, dude. I mean, he's got over 1,000 yards rushing and 14 touchdowns rushing, 5 100+ yard rushing games. On defense, when he played in high school, he had 21 tackles with 5 interceptions. That's a guy that had some experience, and you see it a lot in high school, playing both ways. But to have the numbers he did on defense too, just also factor in his speed. I think you need that, especially on the defensive side today. Even if you're a team like Mississippi State, you got to have that speed. I would not be shocked if they find. Well, I'll say this. I would be disappointed if they don't find time to put him on the field if he's really healthy and ready to go. They got to play a guy like him, I think.
The potential's there for sure. He can be someone that can be an impact player, but they need someone to. And again, I keep saying maybe. They have options, but they don't have anyone that's proven. Like you do not have in Starkville right now a surefire number 1 SEC level corner. That is a concern. Now, does that mean they won't have one? No. Does that mean they won't have 2? Also, no. You might look up at the end of the year and you ended up having a duo that played really, really well over the course of the season. But this is the group that is the big concern for the team overall for the year. Again, they've got some guys who are talented. They've got some guys who could end up being solid players. I don't think they need their corners to be superstars to be improved defensively, but they've got to find a way to get competent play on the outside. They're going to need some guys to step up for sure.
College football is even more exciting when you've got some action on the line, and the games are even better when you're cashing in. And the Voice of College Football is the place to be to get the greatest value. Start with my picks. 75% against the money line, 58% against the spread, and I've got a 40-plus year track record. 11-0 in the college football playoff for me last year against the money line, 8-3 against the spread. And I'm just the warm-up act. Steve Merrill of Wager Talk is our ace in the hole, show stopper. 7 years with the Voice of College Football, over 30 years in the industry. Steve gives us analysis on all the big games, but you can't miss Steve's weekly under-the-radar pick. 28-12 against the spread the last 3 years. You also get picks from some of our top analysts here at the Voice of College Football, including Corey Bratta, Matt Zemek, and Steve Dace. Check out those numbers. Become a YouTube or Patreon member for just $99 per month. Go to the main channel on YouTube, click join, and then select the betting tier. Do the same thing on Patreon. Make 2025 a winner now.
So with the defense, well, let's get into like our reasons for optimism, reasons for concerns, questions that we have. Christian, what is the thing you were most optimistic about for Mississippi State defensively going into the season?
Oh, um, the talent's there, the depth's there. They should have no problem putting guys on the field. And if something goes wrong, just take the guy off the field, next man up. I feel like the pieces are in place, and that's why I would be optimistic.
Yeah, I think it kind of similarly. I'm optimistic because of the overhaul that you had in the offseason. I know, again, from a coaching staff standpoint, did you make the changes many fans were hoping for? No, but I like the new faces you have within that coaching staff, bringing in Vincent Dancy, bringing in Paul Rhodes and Mike McIntyre. I think those guys are going to help you out. I absolutely like what you did in terms of improving the talent and improving the depth. This is a team that is night and day from where they were a year ago on the defensive side of the ball with the pieces they were able to bring in. And if there is one reason to be optimistic, it is that this defense, you have more talent, more depth, more experience across the board. You should be improved, and ideally better coaching. You should be improved just because of that. And if that's all you have going for you, that is a reason to be excited that you are taking a step forward. What's something that's a concern with you with the state defense?
Where would I begin? I think the concern is, even though I mentioned having the talent and the depth, I hope that it can come together. I feel like talent is nothing if you can't play as a whole unit. And I feel like the concern is, what if it's not there to come together at the right time in the season, which the right time is right now. Like the start of the season is fixing to pick up. So I feel like the concern is, what if they don't get off to that hot start playing together as a team and everyone's all over the place and then it just falls apart?
For me, I kind of already alluded to it in the last positional preview. It's cornerback.
Right.
I don't know that I don't know that they have two quality starting corners, much less one. Or I guess it'd be the other way around. I don't know that they have one, much less two. I do think there is some potential in that room. Again, I think there's guys who could turn out to be pretty solid players for you. But do you have guys that can hold up against SEC receivers, especially with the talent that you have at receiver in this conference? I don't know. And you have to hope that the rest of the unit is able to, the rest of the defense is able to pick up that unit. Because again, either you need guys to break out or you need everyone else defensively to be really, really strong to help out what you're able to do on that side of the ball. What's something that you're just kind of questioning? Not necessarily negative or positive, but you're kind of just wondering what we're going to see coming this coming season.
How good are these linebackers that they've brought in? How good are the guys that they bring back? I think we know that they had some issues, but they had some good moments last year. I want to see how it holds up. I want to see, especially with some of the new guys. They brought in some transfers. We looked at it tonight from guys from Tennessee, from Georgia, from really a couple different schools, a couple community college type players. I want to see how they get in, and ultimately, what's the rotation going to be overall, and is it going to work out in the long run?
For me, it's, do you have SEC level difference makers along the defensive line?
Okay.
That unit is definitely improved. There is no doubt about it. Again, everything I've talked about in terms of talent, depth, size, that is most true when you talk about the defensive line from where they were a season ago to where they're going in this year. And I do think they will be better because of that. Are those guys difference makers in the SEC? Like, that is going to be the thing that, if you talk about raising the floor of this defense, it is finding guys that are more than just role players on the defensive line. They really need a couple guys to be true difference makers. You need guys who can be disruptive, get after quarterbacks. You need guys who the opposing offense has to double team consistently. If you can do that, that's going to change everything for what you've got defensively. I think they've got some nice options. Again, I think they will be better. Do you have legitimate difference makers on the defensive line? That's what I'm hoping for. With these transfers you brought in from the lower level, what's that transition going to look like? With the guys who maybe we're not big time contributors at their previous stops, but the recruiting profile is there of like, hey, this guy could be really good. And that applies to some of the guys already on the roster. When you talk about a Trevion Williams, Calvin Dinkins, Deontay Anderson, like those are all players that when they signed with State, there was excitement they could be really, really good players for MSU, and you ultimately never saw it come to fruition. Can they break out and be big-time SEC players this year? That is going to be the big question for me for the Bulldog defense. What are your overall expectations for this group as we go into 2025?
I wish I could say the expectation is championship level playing, but I know that we need to set the bar a little bit lower there. I just hope that it's a team that gets better each week and eventually throughout the season can find the right consistency to where they are consistently getting better, consistently, tackling, getting stops on third down. Maybe some hard hitting linebackers in there that you see week in and week out. I hope that it comes together as a unit, like I said, but I hope that there's a lot of consistency, that it's not just 1 week. I hope consistency, you see it improve throughout the year.
I expect a defense that is better. I
Mhm.
expect a defense that should be good enough that against the lesser teams on State's schedule, they play defense well enough to not just get embarrassed. Sports Talk with Austin coming in here. What's up, guys? Hope Mississippi State goes 6-6 and wins a bowl, but I feel another 3-9 season is incoming, unfortunately. It's possible.
Most likely. Yeah.
I mean, I'm probably a little bit higher than 3-9, but I do understand like the thought process there. I certainly hope they can go 6-6. I would take that.
I
Right now,
pegged them at the beginning of this show when I first started out. One of the first ones I did a schedule preview, and I said I wouldn't bet on them to make a bowl yet, but it wouldn't surprise me if they found a way to win a couple SEC games if they get anywhere close to it at like 5-7. And I think you got to be okay with that for now.
Yeah, that would be a huge step forward. And again, look, defensively, showing improvement there is going to help lead to that. So I do think they'll be improved on that side of the ball to where you talk about a game like Northern Illinois, you talk about the Southern Miss game in the season opener.
Mhm.
I don't think those teams should be able to just light up State's defense. Now, I do think Southern Miss, as I talked about in the non-conference preview, they've got some playmakers on that offense, specifically Braylon Braxton, the quarterback. Those are guys who are going to be able to make some plays and give you a little bit of course, a playmaker can make plays. Great phrasing on my part. Those are guys who can maybe give you some trouble. Northern Illinois, I'm kind of a little bit more questioning what they've got there.
Yeah.
But, well, it's just they lost so much.
Yeah.
Which, frankly, their offense, I talked about this in the previous episode, their offense was not that great anyway, so it's possible that they could get better just even with new faces. We'll see. But I think State should be good enough defensively that we're not talking about those units being able to just run them over and give them a ton of problems.
Right.
I do think they'll be good enough defensively that they can be adequate in a few SEC games. What concerns me is, are they going to take enough of a step forward, or maybe not concerned, but where I'm questioning, are they improved enough that against these high-level SEC offenses, and not even SEC, Arizona State's a high-level offense as well,
Mm-hmm.
these really good offenses that are going to be on the schedule with Arizona State, Georgia, Texas, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, I think, could be really good offensively. Tennessee, I'm not super high on.
Right.
But those are like Tennessee also from a schematic standpoint, I know offensively has the ability to do a lot of really unique things and give you some problems. How do you hold up against those teams where they have the big talent advantage? Are you going to be playing good enough defense that you can really come in and slow those teams down? Mississippi State goes 5-7, shows improvement. Does that buy 100%? Levy would be back.
Heck yeah,
Levy,
man.
anything
less of 5 wins, I think, and you're kind of starting to get that seat warm. I would think.
I mean, look, there's going to be pressure going to year 3, but yeah, 5-7 is probably the baseline of like everyone is pleased with the direction. 4-8 though, he's fine. 3-9, he's probably still okay. 2-10, we're probably having a different conversation. But yeah, 5-7, he'd 100% be back, and it wouldn't even be a question. But again, talking with the defense here, and defense will dictate the most wins, as T. Watley points out. I'm kind of like, I'm 50-50 on that, because I do hear and agree. I think the defense could set the ceiling. I'm kind of the mindset the offense could set the floor, and here's why I say this. It's kind of getting into the point that I was just making. For as improved as I do think State will be defensively, I've talked a lot about how much defense is determined by talent. They're still going to be less talented than most of the offenses that they face. And how do you find ways to slow those teams down? That's going to be the tough part for me. Are they? I don't know that they are so improved defensively that they're really going to be able to get significant stops against a lot of those teams that I rattled off just a few minutes ago. So if you're talking about those offenses still being able to put a lot of points on the board just by being better, stronger units, that's where I look at it like defense. You're probably not going to see just a massive, massive change in the overall production. Now, again, I think the teams you should beat, that's where I'm really looking and like, okay, those teams defensively, you should look like an SEC team looks like against, a G5 opponent. The SEC games, I'm kind of wondering how much really changes. Although, look, they can't play like they did against Arkansas. Arkansas, that was the most abysmal defensive performance we've really ever seen. Like, it has to be significantly better than that. So I'm not going to just sit here and say like you can't show significant improvement in SEC games as well, just because the talent differential, they can. What I'm kind of getting at, though, is I still think a lot of the offenses are probably going to be able to do what they want, which we'll see. Will Mississippi State defense be opportunistic and create short fields for the offense? I'm wondering what approach they're going to take here. Kind of the two schools of defense. Do you try to play conservatively and force opposing offenses to have to go on long drives and beat you in the red zone, or do you try to create big plays and have those impact plays be what gets you the ball back? I will say traditionally, you pair a quick strike offense and a big play offense with a big play defense, which is what State wants to do. I would say that the way State played defensively last year suggests that they want to be a little bit more on the conservative side, but I also think it's hard to take much away from how they played last year in terms of determining what they're going to do going forward because of the personnel that they were dealt. Right. So actually, there were some things they showed that makes me think they do want to be a little bit more on the aggressive side. I think they're going to try to be opportunistic. I think they're going to try to make some big plays, and if that means giving up a big play, giving up a quick strike here or there, you kind of live and die with that. But I tend to think they're going to want to be much more disruptive and be a big play defense compared to where they were a season ago. But look, that puts more pressure on the back end. And we talked about concerns with cornerback. Like, if you're going to do that, you better be getting pressure. Because that means you're probably playing a lot more aggressive coverage on the outside, and that's going to put more pressure on those corners. So if you're going to do that, you better hope that those guys are players that you can really rely on to cover one-on-one. But yeah, again, I think the defense is going to be better. I think you will see it throughout the year. I just wonder if the talent has gotten to a point where they can really slow down the upper level teams that they're going to face. And I think it should be recognized previously at Mississippi State, even some of the defenses that were really good, save for 2018, which is, I think, the best defense in school history, where you had an absurd amount of NFL talent on the field. Other seasons where you had really good players and you had good defenses against the top-end talent, those teams were kind of able to have their way. I'm wondering if you kind of get the same thing this year. Can Mississippi State defense hold teams to 17 to 20 points a game? They do, will that lead to wins in the SEC play? Dude, if they're holding teams to 17 to 20 points a game, they're winning a bunch of games. I don't think they're doing that.
Yeah. Now they have, so I will say, I mean, you looking at the schedule here, I mean, Southern Miss or Alcorn State, maybe, but I doubt it happens in SEC play, and I doubt it happens against a team like Arizona State.
Yeah, no. Northern Illinois, you should be able to hold them to very few. Alcorn, obviously, you should be able to. Southern is
You could
interesting.
probably even shut them out if you're lucky,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Southern is interesting because I think Southern, it really comes down to how many big plays are they able to hit in that game.
Yeah.
If you don't give up a bunch of big plays, you're probably going to have a really decisive victory. But if Southern's able to hit enough big plays, I could see them putting, 24, 28 points on the board, just depending on what happens. You certainly hope you hold them underneath that. SEC play, it's going to be tougher. I mean, the offenses that I look at is question marks are Missouri and Arkansas, and those are teams that lit you up last year. Now, those are teams that have very different offenses this year, but you're also going on the road and playing them as opposed to at home. Tennessee, I have a lot of questions about, but am I just doubting Tennessee a little bit too much? I don't know.
They get Florida too, I think. That's a team I question.
Yeah,
I think they get Florida.
They do.
Yeah.
And that's a Florida team that had its best offensive day of the season against Mississippi State a year ago, which a lot of teams did. That's not really saying anything all that special. But, yeah, man, that's going to be kind of the big question for them. I mean, how much better are they truly? I think we're talking about an improved defense. I think you will see it mostly in the non-con, though. I think conference play could still be iffy because I think some of those teams are just going to have the talent advantage, which is where, to me, it goes back on offense being able to do enough.
Absolutely.
I think that about does it for us today.
Yeah.
Thanks for everybody for tuning in. Really appreciate the interaction throughout the show. Glad to see the live viewers growing more and more. That's great. Again, be sure to give us a like, comment your thoughts below, share the stream, and subscribe to the channel. Make sure you hit that the bell notification as well. Oliver McLeod, my guy. Good show, boys. Love to hear from you. Turn on those notifications so you know that when we go live. And we'll absolutely be back to continue talking more Bulldog football going forward. I'll be back later in the week for sure because we have more schedule stuff to be able to talk about going forward. And we have more season preview stuff over here these last few weeks. But ton of fun being able to do another show here.
Absolutely. Hopefully I can stick around too, guys.
Absolutely. All right, then. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We will see y'all later on.